Well, welcome. Happy Saturday. We are the Level Set crew, and I am just ecstatic that I am in community with my brothers this morning. Jerry ALT Christmas is tending to a family situation offline, and he's back. The Dr. Charles Alexander in all his brilliance, and the Mike Jones, who we see our Dr. Alexander's counseling is working on because he had the temerity to not bastardize himself and give himself credit for his brilliance slightly, ever so slightly this morning. And I am Attorney Larry Fields, and we're here, and we're going to deal with the subject this morning of the powerful ancestor, Dred Scott, and all of his temerity, some of his temerity. We could not possibly, in a year of shows, give him the due that he deserved in challenging the system in the manner that he did and in the time frame that he did back in the 1800s. So, with no further ado, I'm going to open the floor up for Dr. Alexander. He has done, despite the fact that he fancies himself as a non-legal layman, in the past, he's done an incredible job in laying the framework that any Socratic classroom would appreciate with respect to the Dred Scott case and the precedent thereof. And we have to admit one of the tenets that I think is very important for us to have as St. Louisans is that no St. Louis, no civil rights movement. There were just so many important decisions that emanated from ground zero, as we will call it, St. Louis, that we need to have more pride than we do. And this is not just a 314 situation. This is a pertinent foundation for the civil rights movement. Dr. Alexander, please.
Yes. And so, um, and again, I mean, just in terms of what you just said in terms of no St. Louis, no civil rights. I, th I think well, I know that we have to be more thoughtful about this case in particular, Dred Scott case. And there are a number of layers and levels um, that really just kind of come to mind. And kind of a quick one that's not necessarily, it's not about really it's not what the case is about, but it is it is one of the fundamental implications. Um, but one of the things that we still struggle with today is how we're going to identify ourselves, and and how in this in this 400-year struggle, um, we we at many times just obviously kind of succumb to the pressure. And one of those times happened in the early 1800s, where in response to um, the establishment of, I think it's I don't know if it was the American Colonization Society, one of those colonization pieces where the goal was to essentially get rid of all of the freed Africans and persons of African descent and keep the enslaved Africans here. That they were going to send everybody else back to the continent. And in that time, and this part here is a part of, the part of the record of the color conventions, that we had leadership, a portion of leadership move, and I have to go back and read the document to see if it was actually accepted, but we had a part of the leadership move to stop calling ourselves African, because if we call ourselves African, that would suggest to the oppressor that we ain't really want to be here and we ain't identify with here. So we started calling ourselves, or those of us who thought in that manner, started calling ourselves colored. White folks didn't really create that as an identification for us. We did that as a response, or some of us did that as a response. And um, and again, you we have historical African institutions established as African such and such and such and such. You know, notably the African Lodge of Prince Hall Masonry and the African Methodist Church. So we had that, and there are several, many others. But I bring that up because um, today still have we still have that vacillation, and folks trying to decide if they're African, if they're African American, if they're black, or I'm just a United States citizen. Well, this case should help you to understand you ain't just a United States citizen. There's some stuff tied into that. But what is very interesting in Taney, um, who wrote the what do you call it? What's that? The legal term?
The majority opinion.
The majority opinion. He's very clear that we're Africans. He said all through the opinion, and that's a part of what his justification is in the case. And so, for those who aren't real clear, in short, uh, Dred Scott was born into slavery. He was sold to some folks, or to this person, I think Emerson. Um,
No, 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 no. You're gonna stay there a minute because what you have just done is you have answered a question that Black folks have been dealing with since 1690. So let's emphasize that, Mike. And I see you quiet, but I'm just going to emphasize this and let them get back to that because you have just answered the question. The hyenas have told you you're never going to be a hyena.
you ain't gonna be all right.
You're a lion, and that's who you are.
That's who you are.
Doc, so I mean, I just wanted to stop and emphasize that because I don't appreciate the way you glean that in there, and you're going to make it subtle that we are Africans.
We are African.
All right, so but so please, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm glad I interrupted you.
Hmm. And as such, you know, his, essentially, let me go back one more time. When people think about this case, what people think about this case is, you know, Tanny's statement that, black people or people of African descent have no rights that white folks are bound to respect or what have you. He say that relatively early in, you know, in this document. There's a whole litany of things that he writes in establishing his point, and they all center around, um, our right or lack thereof to be citizens, and on whether or not it was ever intended for us to be citizens. And 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 that's why, other than so first of all, yesterday was the 100th and blah 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 something, um, you know, anniversary or commemoration of of the case, March 6, 1856.
50, yeah, 56 or 57th. I believe it was 56.
And so, um, but we are looking at all of this stuff that's happening today, and under this administration, and we continue to think that our citizenship is, rested and nestled in something beyond the stroke of a pen. And that's again what this case is about. And so ultimately, the reason why um, Dred Scott's freedom was revoked, and what's fundamental to why the African has no rights that the white man is bound to respect, is that, and how Taney conceptualizes it, is that all we were ever meant to be was property. And uh, at the time of both the um, what was that piece? The piece, it's the legal piece for the territory for the Northwest Ordinance of um,
The
1787.
compromise, the
So before the Missouri Compromise, but the Northwest Ordinance, in
that
which
established that portion of Missouri was a free state and a portion was
and and Ohio and Illinois and all those places, because
not, were free.
Illinois is kind of central to the piece.
Right.
Um, so when the Constitution is established, we are chattel, and when the Northwest Ordinance is established, we are chattel. And Taney's fundamental point is that we weren't citizens then, and were never intended to be citizens. We are as an inferior race, and so, which again is this other thing where folks keep, you know, thinking this thing in today's terms and not looking, trying to even appreciate the magnitude of what was going on. You know, it was never a time that these jokers didn't know we were people. They just thought we were inferior people. They didn't think we were beasts. They just treated us like beasts. They treated us like beasts of burden, knowing full well that we were human beings, because they knew everything that had been going on the continent, which is why we was here in the first place. But that's a whole nother story. Um, and so, fundamentally, again, his point is that the court in St. Louis had no jurisdiction in the case because A, he wasn't a citizen, and um and well, fundamentally that he wasn't a citizen. He wasn't a citizen because that's not how
That's it.
that was never the intention of citizenship. And though he lived there, and even though the court, I mean, he even says that, it's fine for the court to even say that, you know, he's free, but that don't even make him free nowhere else. That just makes him free in the state of Missouri. And
Well,
so,
what Charles, but
mhm.
with it, his assertion about freedom, I remember, is was it because he was in Missouri? It was because he had spent time in Illinois or wherever,
Well, right.
and
So
Wisconsin. I think
yeah,
it
he
was
went to
Wisconsin.
well,
Illinois,
It,
well,
but that's part of his point, is that A, he's like the the issue with the Northwest Ordinance, um, is it really doesn't matter.
but his
Because
argument was I became free when I was
I
under the
became I became
jurisdiction,
free when I was
and
there. But
so when I came
his
back
point was
here,
that,
right.
right, right. But Tanny's point was that that whole time that you were there as a slave. That's kind of Tanny's point in the whole piece. And then when you come back to Missouri, he files suit, and in Missouri, he's filing suit within the context of a history of people winning that same case that have been established as precedent
that
in
was
the state of Missouri. And and Tanny is saying really all of those cases are wrong, because at the end of the day, you ain't a citizen. And since you ain't a citizen, you can't go to court. You can't file you can't file suit because you're not a citizen. So the fact that you've met, the fact of the Northwest Ordinance and Teddy's piece is irrelevant because because there's no jurisdiction because you're not a citizen. The court was acting in error.
Could
The
could
way he
I ask?
got to court, the basis, Mike, and I'm gonna be
Okay.
real short, is it is a legal standing that is termed diversity in federal courts because this case meandered through the state court. It hit a roadblock in state court, and so he had the temerity to file it in federal court. And slavery was not a federal question. It was not an issue. So he was in court. The basis for his standing is called diversity. And in order to have a right to have your day in federal court for diversity, all the parties on the opposite side of the V, which is the versus, have to be from totally separate states. So he's suing, and based on Missouri, and Missouri or Illinois law. I don't remember which residency he was espousing, and he's suing his former slaveholder, the wife of his former slaveholder, based on her residency in another totally separate state. And the amount of controversy is a threshold. So today it has to be $75,000 and a penny. And that's the basis. And that then the federal court can then have what's known as supplemental jurisdiction over all the other issues. They can then take into account if there's a contract claim, a non-federal claim, and so forth. So that's the basis on which the standing in federal court was. And so what Tanny's saying is you don't have standing because you're not a resident of the United States in any state.
In any matter.
You don't have any sort of citizenship. You have to have citizenship to do it. And that's the piece that is often overlooked. And that is important today. Why, Mike Jones?
Well, uh, I kind of want to back
I know
up
you
just a
want to
bit,
back up. I know
right?
you want to back up, but we need to
Now,
give.
now, there's a rap song that I could have said it like that, but I ain't gonna say it like
Well,
that
why
because
not? Because it remains a crowd favorite.
and since we all know what I'm talking about, I don't have to say it.
No,
What
sir.
what
No,
But
sir.
it
what's
certainly
that?
will be fun if you did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's the expression? What's understood doesn't have to be
Doesn't have to
explained.
be
Okay,
stated. No, it does not.
right. But I, I want us in this. There's a whole lot of moving pieces. And part of our challenge is we always get the context wrong. Okay. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and so we're judging Tanny on a 21st or 20th century, late 20th century, and maybe 21st century moral standard. Okay. We ain't looking at circumstances and legal. Okay. Because fundamentally all of it was immoral. So we don't even need the fact that we even talking about it is we've already breached any semblance of morality, or else we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Let me ask you this
But
though, Mike.
yeah,
Because there was precedent that supported Dred Scott's position.
that I would suggest, Larry, and you and Gerald or have the license to validate or object. Uh, wouldn't change my opinion, but I would say that the reason you had such diversity is to the point that you raised earlier with Charles. It was a state issue. And because it was a state issue, it had never been settled in federal court at the highest level, then you could have a myriad of decisions that conflicted with each other. Okay,
And he actually says that. He actually said he alludes to that in the opinion, and he says even again he says the state that this could have all been fine if there was no verses. So the whole issue is that somebody contested,
right.
and that's what he's looking at in terms of even the fact that there was precedent. Is that if any of those other cases had literally been contested, you know, none of those people would have been free either.
Either.
You
I
know,
mean,
possibly, yeah,
because that's the Supreme Court ruling. The
correct.
final judgment is they all got it wrong. Here's how they should have looked at
It's
it.
how it
Okay,
should have been.
being
Right.
right now.
Yes.
So that puts that out there. But the other thing that I think you have to deal with is part of all of that is the reason it was a state issue because you didn't have the 13th and 14th Amendment yet, and you're operating under the 10th Amendment, where anything that's not explicitly assigned to the federal government as authority defers to the states, whatever it is. So that's the other reason you could have all of that action below the Supreme Court. I want to jump back to something else that your brothers introduced me to Neely Fuller Jr. and I think his paradigm is the one thing you have to understand and
You
accept.
gotta understand.
You got to if you don't understand racism and white supremacy, everything else will confuse you. Dred Scott is a classic example. If
This
this
is
was a
the ultimate white supremacist document
yeah,
right
right.
here.
And we get Dred Scott wrong literally because we don't get Neely Fuller Jr. right. Okay. And so once you understand Neely Fuller Jr., uh uh the Supreme Court in 1853, 56, whatever it was, makes sense. It ain't right, but it's rational now at this point.
Let me
So,
ask you this, Mike.
right.
Give me a synopsis of white supremacy so people have a foundation going forward. What is
Well,
the
I,
thing that we need to understand with respect
well,
to
I,
that?
I think, I think I'm gonna even narrow his. The predicate of the founding of the United States is that white men have an inherent hierarchical privilege, however they define that, and that the purposes of the Constitution and the government and the mores and culture of the society is to support and animate that privilege. So I would even suggest racism didn't create white privilege. White privilege created racism to rationalize itself. So if you're starting back from the predicate of what's this about, if it's about me having an inherent hereditary, inherited right of privilege over you, I still need a moral, intellectual, political rationalization. Okay, and so racism becomes that's my theory of the case. That this is not a will or power that I have that I created for this moment. I need you to accept it. I need everybody else to accept it. So I have to develop a rationale. And the rationale explains why that theory of the case explains why this is the rational position. And that's how you create legitimacy in everything.
So, in
Okay.
other words, they are shapeshifters to the hegemony of the white male.
Right. Whatever however that expresses itself. So So racism is, I told you I'm assembling the book now, and I'm going back and reading all of this stuff I wrote, and I say, damn, I said that shit.
Well,
Wow,
yeah.
okay.
And see, and see, Doc, that's why we got the half-hearted I'll say relief from the self-loathing this morning. Kwame, I want to ask you a couple of questions as I sit here. Number one, studying this at uh, at Thurgood Marshall Law School, how was that? Because I can tell you, studying this in mixed company was traumatic for me. Having to go through this and to sit in a constitutional law class with individuals that were the descendants of Tanny or slave owners was very, very difficult for me. And it's still somewhat difficult to approach this, because I can go through it in pieces, but it's just traumatic for me because I mean, it felt like real time. I've been to, I go to the courthouse and I give homage, man, but it is very difficult having to study it. And as you very well know, in law school, you can tell the race of the plaintiff and the defendant just based on the outcomes. And most times, so I want to know how if that was the case for you at Texas Southern, and then I like to go and get just your opinions on what you've heard so far.
It was not the case at Texas Southern. That was the good thing about being at Texas Southern and being in that environment. Predominantly at Texas Southern, overwhelmingly, we had at the law school, we had Black, Hispanic, and African students. So having this conversation was very easy to have, and especially to have the direct result of knowing that this came from the whole concept of white superiority and the fact that Black people were just cattle, for less of a better word, not considered to be people or citizens at all, but just property. And so that was very well understood. And I think that right now we're dealing with, we've never really moved away from this. We've always been dealing with this in some aspect of trying to figure out where we belong and how we should be using our power in this country and how we should be working collectively to move our community forward. I think we're having the biggest difficulty with that right now as a result of this because we still are back and forth trying to determine, who we are and what we want to be.
Let me go to Gerald's point, and Larry, it's your point too. The Tanny argument becomes moot in 1865, and in 18 whenever the 14th Amendment is passed. For this reason, if you look up in the dictionary, amendment, what it means to amend, it means to fundamentally change something. And what the amendment does is change what came before it, and now something else is in play. So the 13th Amendment eradicated that part of the Constitution. See, the Constitution doesn't get chance to stay the same document that it was. It has to become the document that it is as a function of the amendment. And when you put the 14th on top of the 13th, fundamentally you eradicate Tanny's argument. Okay, that you could make, if I was in law school and a Black professor, I could actually teach Dred Scott and say not that he was morally correct, but he might have been. He had a constitutional argument.
It,
After the
it, it,
13th,
yes.
after the 13th and 14th Amendment, he no longer has that argument because
And that's the whole, and that's the whole crux of the piece, Mike, is in that, and even so. the defendant in the case, the alleged, owner, after, the sales and the deaths and all that other kind of stuff that happened, his whole point is that even in the state of Missouri, Dred Scott ain't a citizen.
And,
He just lived there. And
and,
whether
and
he yeah, and so
yeah,
whether he was whatever he is, he ain't a citizen.
and what I'm saying is we do very, I'm gonna call it childish intellectual thinking. Is we want white folks to go back and apologize for Tanny and Dred Scott.
Ain't happening.
And wait, and the reality is, I would argue I'm going to assert the 13th and 14th Amendment. Because here's where the 14th Amendment is critical. It supersedes, relative to citizenship, it supersedes the 10th. Because it has a statement that says that the rights and fundamentally the rights and privileges of any United States citizen cannot be supplanted by any state law. So as fundamentally, no state in the country has the constitutional authority to abrogate or minimize your rights as a citizen. And the 13th and 14th Amendment declare your citizenship now in this thing we call the United States unconditionally. Ain't no qualifications in it. So the only question is the enforcement of the law. And we keep wanting to make these preacher arguments about, I want to hear you apologize and all that. I don't really give a fuck.
And
Okay.
These are all legal issues.
exactly. I
Right?
mean,
They're
it's almost like,
constitutional issues.
And
But
the
But
but
issue that what I think was really interesting is that when you talk about the 14th Amendment, we right back at this issue right now because we're
right now,
talking about birthright. 14th Amendment was about birthright citizenship. And so we are here right now
but
and
Gerald,
we're
but they
discussing it
want
right now.
they want to argue that the birthright citizenship was only for us. So
Right.
this ain't a citizenship about us. It's a citizenship about other people. Okay.
that's what
Now,
we think.
uh,
It clearly will have an effect on other people, and I think it's more so designed right
oh
now
well.
to
Wait a minute.
target the Hispanic
Wait a minute.
population, but
I
it'll have an overall effect on
wait a minute.
everyone.
I understand the political ramifications. I don't even understand the political fight. I'm saying you need to be clear on what the argument is so you can pick the right weapon.
Hmm.
That's our fucking problem. I mean, we respond to everything emotionally. I don't respond to shit emotionally. Once Mike Tyson once got asked, when you're in a fight, when you get hit, do you get mad? And his answer was, "You already in the fight. Getting mad don't make no difference. Now the object is to try to win the fight." So we need to figure out. We keep wanting some kind of reconciliation with
We
white
want a
America,
biblical response to a constitutional issue.
right? Oh,
that's why
I
we're
want
walking
even.
around with signs talking of, essentially, we're not animals or apes. I mean, what
Wait a
kind
minute.
of
Wait a minute.
foolishness is
Wait.
this?
But
We
we
don't
Wait a
have
want
minute.
to
time
be,
for performative
I think
foolishness.
Wait
we
a
want to be
minute.
accepted. We want to be
Here,
accepted and be
here,
a part
here.
of the country instead of taking the position that we need to separate. And
Well,
that's the hard thing for us.
Well,
well.
that's the hard
Wait.
work.
That's the
But
hard work and the hard thing. But
But I think that's a
we
separate conversation that
that's
requires a
uh,
whole nother thing because we can't
it
right.
does.
separate. We need not. We don't need to. We don't even need to delve into that. That's
Yeah.
foolishness. Um, but go ahead, Mike Joe.
But no, I was gonna say literally to that. What we need is some politicians like Joe Manchin. Now you got he gonna run. Trump is gonna run out of ammunition and rockets and all that kind of shit. And even if they got enough for Iran, they're gonna have to replenish it. You got 60 black members in the House. You got a couple of black senators. I would tell Republicans, Trump, and anybody white that was listening, you ain't got to vote for a motherfucking thing to replenish your. I wouldn't give a shit if you never had another rocket for Iran. If I got to vote to replenish the oil, until you give me my shit, I ain't giving you nothing. So if you don't want them boys killed, you better bring their ass home, because they're gonna be over there with nothing, and I'm gonna be okay with that. Okay? Now I ain't since you can't make me an American now because you didn't make me an American then. So fuck you. But right now I'm sitting in this House of Representatives with 60. Okay? Now if you got enough white folks to pass it, pass it. And I'm gonna live with that. But if you ain't and you need me, and if Joe Manchin could do that with one, I just and again, I've been rereading these columns, and I look, and I literally I wrote a column about him called "The Power of One," and I translated it into what that would look like if you had somebody black doing that. You could have redefined. You could have got the voting right. I said it before. You could have got voting rights passed before you did COVID. And if we had passed voting rights, we wouldn't be sitting here with this shit right now.
But
We
that is a
probably
level of
wouldn't be in.
consciousness, though, isn't it, Dr. Alexander?
Correct. I mean,
Now,
it
you know
is.
what?
And
No, you
and
know,
so are we not? I mean, so do our politicians have that? Or are we still getting?
no, we got two things. We got a consciousness level, and we got political civic leadership that's as soft as hospital cotton. What
Exactly.
you,
And that's the whole
yeah,
problem right there.
that's the point. That you got to say no. Well, you know that fuck them. Okay, I mean the literal that in the movies, because we all like the movie. It ain't never but two questions, or the right answer to the first question. The first question is, did you bring the dope? The answer is always the same. Did you bring the money?
And Mike, I looked up real quickly. I don't have the updated numbers, but in 2018, out of the 47 members we had, only 6 of them represented a district that had diversity, a majority.
And
So
wait a
the
minute.
overwhelming majority of them
That's my point.
represent districts that's all black. They don't even
It's
have a
all black.
reason to be up
Yeah,
there advocating for white folks. You know what I'm
I,
saying?
yeah,
They not
I'm
even
gonna.
in
They
Congress
have no
because of
reason to
white
be
people.
reaching across
And
the
they
aisle.
all of them up there, every time they get ready to talk, every last one of them is telling you about the American people. The American people, they never putting us first. They never putting us first in that conversation, what black people need done and what we need to happen for us. That every time they open their damn mouths, it's always the American
Oh,
people. And what that means is the white people. That means the white people.
and here's the other fundamental part of that argument. There is no magic in American democracy. The
Right.
democracy is a process. It's a and the outcomes is a function of the people that are working the process. So everything we talked about this morning happened in the Democratic Republic. Okay, the laws we're debating and all that kind of stuff. The American people who were citizens at the time who could vote chose all of this shit. I mean, this wasn't Pharaoh or King decreeing this shit. This was the democratic consensus of how the country should be organized and governed. Okay, so the point of this, we got to save American democracy. No, I don't. Okay, and I found another column as I'm organizing this shit, and I wrote a piece about, and this is like in 21. And the piece was, we always talk about black folks got to think outside the box. And my point was, we need a new box because this box ain't worth shit. The box we in don't ain't never had a place for us. So what we need to be talking about is we need a new box. And Gerald, for me, it's not the physical separation; it's the mental and psychological separation. Charles, will get this. It's the clarity that you have when you Sisyphus walking back down the hill, not Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill. And that's the part of this that we always miss. It's why we get twisted up in all these arguments that don't make no goddamn sense and don't lead to nowhere but a circle that we keep going around in. And that literally is on us because and we struggle to get out of it. If you think about black intellectual thought leaders from from Douglas to Du Bois to Carter G. Woodson to Baldwin, Derek Bell, ain't none of them trying to persuade America. They attempting to explain America to us, and we keep missing school and don't study the lessons because we keep repeating the same shit over and over again. And if you and Baldwin, I've ran across a quote from Baldwin that I used, and it was America is probably unredeemable because white people have been white for too long, and they just incapable of moving. And in the piece, I said, now you could spend the next 20 or 30 years wrestling with this issue to come to the conclusion that James Baldwin has already reached. And or you could believe him and take my 72 years as I'll ratify his point and then start from that point and move forward. That's our problem in all of this. It's these circular arguments that don't ever lead us anywhere.
And
And
we
the
having these
circular
circular
arguments
arguments,
because we
Mike, with
don't
less
want to.
information too. And I think that's problematic because our people are not reading and learning, and they're not having as much information when they go into these arguments. And I think that is even more problematic. I was talking with my daughter who's working in one of the elementary schools in University City and talking about the Black History program, and she was just so frustrated at how the educators in the building are just dumbing it down, and her as a recent college graduate and growing up in our household understands this a lot more, and she's just extremely frustrated by it, and it's happening in schools all across the country.
But what does she do in her class?
Well, she's just an assistant. She can't override the principal and the teachers. She's just there helping out. That's why
Okay.
it's so frustrating to her because she really wanted to call the principal out because, at the end of the Black History program, they're supposed to do something together and the principal wants to do the wobble and she's just flat out. She can't even handle it.
But to your initial point, Gerald, about information, by and large, at the level at which this conversation happens, and that is amongst adults, and this show is primarily for adults, it's a decision.
Hmm.
Anybody can, so the same time the folks spend, researching flights to travel, the same, they could look any of this stuff up, right? And so and so to Mike's point, we enter into these arguments end up circular because they're not predicated and rarely are on fact. And to your follow-up point, Gerald, I mean, we're not engaging the material. And if we continue the other point that has already been established, that this joker ain't in the business of teaching you anything. Never has been, never will be. It was illegal for the majority of the time that we was here. Which is the other point of this, that we don't really want to internalize the reality of this piece. And that's part, again, that's part of his opinion. This is Tanny. The question is simply this: can a Negro whose ancestors were imported into this country and sold as slaves become a member of the political community formed and brought into existence by the Constitution of the United States, and as such become entitled to all the rights and privileges and immunities guaranteed to a citizen? That is what this case is about. It ain't about nothing more than that. That's what it's about. And it's that all the way till we get to the 13th and the 14th Amendment. And so, to your point, Gerald, the 14th Amendment matters now because there's those of us who think that this whole conversation about birthright citizenship should something about it change. Well, that's just for the Mexicans. No, Negro. That's the whole reason it exists is because of us.
Right.
And so, if you take that away, nigga, we ain't citizens. We back to chattel. We
We
back to
back
the
to the
property.
10th. We're
Yes,
back to the 10th Amendment.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And, and, and,
And
and so we don't understand it as such.
and
And that's what they trying, and that's the whole.
our lack of international knowledge prohibits us from seeing that this could happen, because this
Mm-hmm.
has happened in countries all over the globe where they have taken the citizenship
You're
of
wondering why there's refugees, right? Forced,
exactly
forced,
that.
forced
Talk to
migration and
me.
refugees.
Talk to
Well,
me.
but Charles, to this point, citizenship, non-citizenship, being an American, being French, being anything, all of these are social fictions. There is no empirical basis for any of these constructs. They are social fictions that we use to organize society. Okay, you'll be this, you'll be this. This is what we call that. And either we agree with it in terms of consensus, or somebody has the power to impose these definitions. And as long as they maintain the power, or we maintain the consensus work and they govern society. When they no longer are acceptable, or start to conflict with reality, that means either whoever had the power to impose them doesn't have that power anymore, or there's been such a major demographic shift that the agreed upon fictions no longer work in coordinating whatever the social structure is. We redefine them, okay? And then they have to be reimposed. And we used to have, we used to understand time as human beings. We used to understand time as much longer. Now we think everything happens immediately. That, contrary to everybody's understanding, your lifetime ain't very long, okay? In the big scheme of things.
It is
And,
a vapor at best.
best, right. So when you start talking about societal change or cultural change among huge groups of people, from either a country of 90 million people to a planet of 8 billion, literally technology makes it happen faster, but it never happens overnight. So part of the stress you're seeing in America now is that white America, the hierarchy of white America, as well as neoliberal capitalism no longer has the power or has a consensus about these social prototypes that we use to organize around. Now, the problem is and I'm just not talking about us as black folks. We used to kind of make stuff up back in the day in the 60s and stuff, and it's really what Garvey was doing. He wasn't making it up. He was trying to redefine us. But that's some other work that needs to be done. But we're caught up uh, in the same matrix as white folks, and we're as confused about where we are as they are. And Gerald, to your point about what we don't know and how shallow our knowledge is, it's really because white America has been so insidious. This information, and I don't want to say this out loud because, people might get wind of it, but it's all in books. And then, you know how cruel and vicious they are? They take the books and they put the books in the library with numbers on them where you can find them.
Mm-hmm.
And the damnedest thing is the library is free. Now
Right.
everybody knows if you put it in the book, put the book in the library and the library free, ain't nobody going to read it.
But you
Okay?
know what, Mike? You can't even get it because you gotta have a card.
Oh, see, that's the conspiracy. You got to have now they give you the card away. All you got to do is go in and fill it
Now
out.
you can go in there and read it for free. You just can't take it out. You got to have a
That's
card
it.
to leave with it.
Yeah,
But you
yeah,
can sit
right.
in there and read it for
Now,
free. You
now
don't
you
have to have that.
now you know how cruel and
How cruel
insidious
this is.
insidious that is. How are we supposed to figure that shit out, man?
Oh my God.
Mike, you're conjuring my
Reading is
mother.
fundamental.
Mike, you're conjuring my mother this morning, telling one of my siblings that was making these demands on
And
my
then,
parents.
especially in our community, all our political people are politicians. They're trying to gather, favor.
Not
And
they're not politicians. Because a
I think they
politician, now here's what a politician is, Gerald. A politician is somebody who practices the art of acquiring and using power to advance their interests. These motherfuckers are elected officials. Okay,
yeah, okay, well,
okay,
I
and
agree that they're
everybody can.
elected officials. They definitely not leaders,
Yeah.
and I would think a leader would be more in the definition of what you said as a politician as, looking to, serve that specific community and empower
Now,
them.
I won't even make a politician serving and using the power. That's a moral or character definition. I'm saying the art and science of acquiring and using power to
Mm.
advance your interests is what makes you a politician. Now, what
Right.
makes you a ethical and more one with character is then using that skill set and that power to advance the interests of the people that he's chosen to lead or they chose him to lead or her to lead. And so that makes them unethical. And that's why, for me, the most important thing you ought to look at in picking leadership is integrity or character, because that ain't gonna never change. Okay,
Hmm.
you can get better or you can get worse, but the absence of character, a lack of integrity, means you gonna always have a problem.
Let's
And
move.
and so again, just again to get back real quickly to the issue of white supremacy and how this is the white supremacist document par excellence. The words people in the United States, the words people of the United States and citizens are synonymous terms and mean the same thing. They both describe the political body who, according to our Republican institutions, form the sovereignty and who hold the power and conduct the government through their representatives. They are what we familiarly call the sovereign people, and every citizen is one of these people and a constituent member of this sovereignty. The question before us is whether the class of persons described in the plea and abatement compose a portion of this people and, and are constituent members of sovereignty. We think they are not, and that they are not included, and were not intended to be included under the word citizens in the Constitution, and can therefore claim none of the rights and privileges which the instrument provides for and secures to citizens of the United States. On the contrary, they were at the time considered as a subordinate and inferior class of beings who have been subjugated by the dominant race, and whether emancipated or not, yet remain subject to their authority and had no rights or privileges but such as those who held the power and the government might choose to grant them.
Wait a minute, Charles. Here is my rhetorical question that you could answer. Given when he wrote that, given the history from 1789 when the Constitution was approved to the date of that opinion, what did he get wrong?
Nothing.
Okay, I rest my case. So why the fuck will you keep arguing about it?
Yeah, and so that is it becomes an argument when you don't understand it and you haven't done the work. You haven't read it, and because you haven't read this and you don't understand, you don't understand the 10th, 13th, or the 14th Amendments, then again, literally, you're going into gunfights with knives.
Now you're going
Less
into a
than that.
gunfight
Less than that.
unarmed. You ain't
Less
even
than
You're going
that.
unarmed.
You are going unarmed. Less than that. You have absolutely nothing.
And so that gets us into all of these other spaces where we continuously end up vulnerable, and we're arguing about things that really that we continue to argue about things that are actually within our grasp to control, because we're waiting on him to do something different. And he's shown and proven that the only circumstance in which he's going to do something different, and you brought up Derek Bell, is interest convergence. It got to be in his interest for him to pivot. If it don't benefit him, it ain't gonna benefit us.
But that's the way the world works, period.
It's transactional, sir.
But that's the way the world works.
We keep wanting it to be something else, and it ain't gonna be nothing else.
Be more than trans. We want our opponents to compliment our good shots.
It's not gonna happen.
That's not gonna happen. My job is to stop it.
Wait a minute.
But the great thing about Dred Scott was that he resisted, and because of his resistance, is what led us to getting the 13th and 14th Amendment. And it goes back to everything that we talk about all the time, is that you only win when you resist.
This is about the fight.
And this is about the fight, and this is a story about resistance and what you have to do. And this is what I see is what you learn, from this, is that oftentimes we walk into these courtrooms and that, Larry, with nothing, but we coming with resistance.
But you're building too. You're not.
But we're building on it.
But you're not just in the face. He constructed a case against them, and we missed that part. That is actual construction of something.
And he's literally fighting the United States.
That is, I've told clients again and again and again, it's very difficult to see the USA on the other side of the V with your name on it.
It is.
That is very, very, and you see it more than I do, because I only deal with mostly civil things now that I no longer have those kingpin drug cases. Times were good back then. They're still great. But anyway, it is, what he did was more than wishes in the wind. He had a strategy, he had a theory for the case. He went out and found financing to get it done. That is major construction. Mike, go ahead. You were going to add something.
No, I was going to say, just to your comment, we want our opponents compliment our jump shot. They will do that if you Michael Jordan.
They will,
They, wait a
because they
minute,
don't have any choice, because they're
because they
not strong enough to deal with you at that time.
wait a
You're
minute,
not strong enough to deal with
wait a
Mike.
minute, and the reason you do that is because you don't want to piss him off by
You,
talking to him.
but
Okay,
see,
because
but but
he'll
but
take it
Mike
up
made you
another
feel the
level.
pain. Mike would
That's
make
what
you
I'm talking
feel.
about.
Mike would make you feel the pain.
That's what I'm talking
When was the
about.
last time that 47 that you're talking about made anyone feel the pain? They're still under this administration right now trying to appeal to emotions that don't exist in this thing
Right.
and doing performative things. And with that note, Doc, I think you've tied this up nicely, and I want to transition to these midterm, we will call them pre-midterm elections that we had this past week. Uh, 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 Particularly, I want to get you all's opinion on what happened in Texas this week with the with our homegirls. Once again, St. Louis on the map again. Our homegirls attempt to win a senatorial nomination. I shouldn't say nomination, but to win
It
the
was
part,
Democratic nomination.
It
yeah,
was
Democratic nomination for the Senate seat in Texas. I want to ask you all what your thoughts are about that election as it took place.
I
Okay,
think
I'll
that,
jump it.
go
Okay.
ahead. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I just say literally on the Texas thing, we need to make the distinction between politics and celebrity. And just cause you perform well on television, don't make you a politician, man. Okay, and I would suggest that just as a cold-blooded exercise in power, okay, if we don't, and the real problem is now electoral politics is controlled by the political equivalent of pimps, because that's what campaign uh, uh, consultants are. They're just looking for candidates that they can put in a race that raise money that ultimately end up paying them. When you're doing serious politics in the door that I came through, it's gangsters in the back room trying to figure out their next move. And to be honest, what you would have to tell that young sister if she came to the room and say, "I think I want to be the Senate," and you'd have to look at her and say, "We here's our play. We got to hope Paxton beats the other white boy, and we got the worst cracker in America running for the Senate." And your ass wouldn't have a snowball's chance in hell of beating him. So the objective is not making you a senator; it's beating them. Okay, and you use the weapon that is gives you the best chance of that. And if that happens to be the young white boy who looks like a preacher, sounds all that religious shit that the Hispanics got going, and he does some other things, then that's the knife you use in this knife fight, or that's the gun you bring to the gunfight. Okay, this is not about your entrepreneurial career. That fundamentally these are culture decisions. Okay, and you don't get to put yourself in the goddamn game. Okay,
Well, do we?
so my position is sit your ass back down on the bench, and I'll call you when your time comes.
And
Cause you got some talent, but go ahead. That's it for me.
Mike, it seems like this is something that we continue to revisit, because if we go back to the Gary Convention, that was an issue that we were dealing with the presidential election and someone that was running at that time, and the sophisticated black politicians, did not make a stance. Is that I mean, or am I reading this thing wrong?
No, well, for example, I wrote a great piece about Jesse and his impact on on the thing. I think it was a great piece.
It was a
Okay,
great piece. I read it. I thought it was a great piece.
but here's the point. That was double edged too, because Jesse changed the grammar using it in the larger term, the grammar of how electoral politics worked in that there were structures. Now you could argue that maybe black politicians didn't maximize everything, and first of all, everybody is always dissatisfied until you win the ultimate prize. Okay, we don't win the championship, you pissed off. But
So 31 teams are going to be pissed off.
every year, 31 teams are gonna be pissed off because there ain't gonna be but one champion. So here's the point. But in that other system where gifts were exchanged, promises were made, people were using their support leverage to fundamentally exact concessions from the winners and how to govern going forward. The door that Jesse came through is this kind of, and I'm going to say relatively naive, no, I'll call it sophomore notion that the people can decide shit. Now, you can't put that many people in a room to decide nothing. So you gin up the emotions, and that takes the oxygen out the room where you got to do the deal. Because now I can't do the deal because I got somebody who's raised the temperature. And if you take one of my first laws of politics is never get caught on the white side of a black-white argument. Now I got to be over here because this is where everybody at. Now that ain't the smartest place to be, but it's the only place I can be now and stay. And here was the weakness in Jesse's approach, which opened it up for everybody else, and everybody else thinks that's cool. Ain't none of them in the government. Okay, so that means you let somebody get to the White House and bypass these black institutional players that can exact things, that exacted concessions going there and in a position to reinforce it. But if I'm sitting over here as the inside player, I don't know what deal Jesse got, and I don't even know Jesse got a deal. Okay, uh, and Maxine Waters made something very interesting in Obama's first term. There was a black caucus thing. They were going around the country. Someone was doing, and they got to a meeting. I think it was in Detroit, and they was catching a little hell about what they wasn't getting done. And Maxine Waters was reported to have said, "Well, our problem is y'all got a president that we can't put our hands on, okay? Because the way you manage a president is you put your hands on him if you're in the House or the Senate, okay? But they spent all of their time and all of their energy protecting him. And he spent his time and energy trying to unify the country, and unifying the country always comes at our expense. So what I'm
Exactly.
saying, so what I'm saying is, you need a much more sophisticated and disciplined uh, idea of what politics and power is and how it works to stop. Because until that, then everybody that pops up uh, uh, and say you ought to be, and y'all saw them on television, and y'all think so too, and somebody else who knows the game will say, yeah, when they hear you say she can really play, and they say, well, who should go guard? Because she can't check her coat, and you can't play up here unless you can play defense. Okay, or we go dumb the thing down where we don't play defense no more. But the point is, when I look at it, I'm looking at how somebody plays. Y'all looking at how somebody looked in the warm-ups. And literally, you will never pick the right starters if you just go by the warm-ups. Because everybody that's clowning in the warm-up with the reverse dunk and all this shit, that's somebody that ain't gonna fucking play. Okay,
No,
that's why they expend all their energy in the layup line. because they're going to sit down.
You only have
Is
so
it
many dunks in your career.
right?
Gerald, you had an opportunity, and so why in the world would you waste them in the warm-ups? Gerald, you had an opportunity to work in the Senate, and you lived in Texas. So I'd like to get your opinion on what we saw this past week.
Living in Texas and working in the Senate, I always thought it was going to be difficult for her to win that race because she was always going to have an issue with the population in Texas, the Hispanic population in Texas, the white population in Texas, and the black population in Texas. She was only going to carry so much weight, which she was able to do, was what you expected her to carry, but you just did not expect her to win based on the dynamics in Texas. You knew the Hispanics were not going to vote for her. It just was not going to happen, and she was not going to be able to win without the Hispanic vote in Texas.
Dr. Alexander, you were critical, I wouldn't say critical, analytical about this move from the very beginning, and
Yes,
you thought that it was a poorly calculated move.
absolutely.
So I'm going to say told you so. I'm going to impute your knowledge and say told you so.
You said
But
that
I'd
was
like
a
to get.
layup. That wasn't no, I told you so.
But I
Well,
will say
it
this,
was a
though.
layup
I
for
will
you.
say this. I would like to see her in Missouri.
Yeah, I mean, if she be inclined to come back, but like this whole thought, and she said this in her, concession speech, and this ain't about me. This is about the da 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 da, and like you couldn't have thought of a better way to drive people to the polls than for you to give up your seat, and now so now we don't even get the benefit from whatever she has learned.
Right.
Because
Right.
now you're starting all over
With
with the
Freddie
preacher man.
Haynes. With
Yeah.
Freddie Haynes, a pastor.
He probably
Mhm.
right. Now we started all over. And so it's just strategically. It was just a bad decision. And for the reason that you just stated, Gerald, there was no reason to believe that was going to look any different than what
Right.
it ultimately looked. And then, for her to be standing up talking about, the polls wasn't working. Well, if they weren't, that ain't why the white folks ain't vote for you. And so,
Mhm.
and
Right.
so that had whatever impact that it had. And why do we always get to that day to know why we ain't already got infrastructure set up to respond to those glitches that we know are gonna come because that's what the enemy does. And then you at 7 o'clock, you talking about this a problem. You supposed to be fighting that all day. You supposed to be staged, ready to fight that all day. But
We've been
that
That
to
issue should have already been
Gerald,
brought
have you
up.
been Gerald, have you ever been an election day challenger?
Yes.
I have also. And so you
Yes,
are
many a
equipped with
time.
that. You're 100% right, Doc. Yeah, you're equipped
You
as an
go in there
election day
weeks ahead
challenger.
of
You are
time.
equipped.
You go in
You're
there
you
ready
weeks
to
fighting
go to
ahead
that,
of
court
time.
on
yeah.
a moment's notice.
That is
Go ahead,
that is
Right.
Doc.
not that ain't your 7 o'clock polls close plea.
No, sir.
and
No.
and
Mm-mm.
so that too speaks to a level a level or a lack of preparedness for the moment. And so here we are back to ground zero. Now
And you
certainly
talked about Texas.
talking about Texas, so
You know what I'm
so
saying? You
so
talking about
hopefully folks
Texas.
don't withdraw and get caught up in that. They just don't want no sister and take their tails to the pole and support this dude and keep the fight if that's what it's got to be. And so, and that's not even a if. That is what it got to be. That's if the polls have spoken. He's the chosen piece. That it's in your interest to ride with that, and
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 he's gonna be a hard piece in Texas. It's still gonna be a hard battle
still
for
gonna be a
him
hard,
in
a hard,
Texas.
a heavy lift.
It's gonna be a heavy lift in Texas still because they are not in the majority. The white people are still in the majority, and Texas very much has that Lone Star attitude. It's just not a nickname that they have, it's an attitude that
But
they
but,
have in
but
Texas.
Gerald,
They
but
honestly
Gerald,
feel like they are separate from the rest of the country.
but they've always felt like that from the time they
The-
got in the union to now. And if they can figure
exactly.
out how to leave, they would. Okay, that's number
I'm just
one.
saying, Mike, a lot of people here don't realize that because, and when I say here, I'm talking about specifically in the St. Louis area because, we have so many people here that are underexposed. The majority of people that we're dealing with here have never left St. Louis.
We
And
call them
everybody that
Skinker Woodson people. They have never gone further east than Skinker and never gone further
they
west
haven't.
than
I mean,
Woodson.
Right.
just
Ain't
the
no
number of
library
people
on
that
Skinker.
There is a
you come in
beautiful
contact
library. Let
with
me
that
tell
have
you
not
something.
left.
There's a beautiful library on Del Mar where I worked and volunteered in that
Well,
library
then
as
they
a
need to
child.
go there.
They need
Just
to
look.
go there.
That's why I
Oh,
think Jasmine would be so great here because she's somebody who knows St. Louis because she grew up here, but she's also had the exposure of living somewhere else, which is so badly needed here. Because everybody here now is just so St. Louis. They have no exposure outside of this, they have no concept of the world outside of St. Louis.
yeah, but that's a issue in demographics. As St. Louis is 75 years ago, I'll be 77 next in 2 weeks.
Oh,
And I'm
But
going to take
congratulations.
and I'm gonna take the day off and buy myself something nice in your
okay,
honor.
all right, then do that.
We need a
but
party.
We need a party, and that is an official holiday.
uh,
And we're gonna give you your holiday now, partner.
okay,
And I'm gonna buy
but
myself something real nice for your birthday.
You
you do
know how
that.
we are. Turn up. Turn
Yeah,
up.
right.
That's all
Yeah,
we know.
wait. But I was going to say is when I'm born and I'm a baby, St. Louis is still a destination place. That
Exactly.
that there are people coming to St. Louis. So the culture that evolved in St. Louis as a big city with this dynamism was all a part of population growth and the churn and the culture that new people create. And over the last 50 years, that's not been the case. And really longer than that. That
Right.
literally the year I was born was the peak population of St. Louis. And it literally has been going down every year since then till now. The city is not as big as the neighborhood in Chicago. And if you even add the city with the immediate county of St. Louis County, the population is the same as it was in 1970. While the country has gotten 55% bigger, the city and the county is exactly the same population, 1,400,000. What's
And if you
interesting,
talk to them about merging, Mike, it blows their mind. They can't
but,
even
but, but
conceptualize it.
well, that's because everybody would have to give up their little bit of something. But here's the point: even
Got
with
to give that
no
little fiefdoms up.
Yeah, even with no growth in population, if you merge the city and the county as one metropolitan government, that would be 500 and change square miles, maybe 600 square miles, with 1.5 million people, a little less than 1.5 million people. And it would be the 10th or 11th largest city in America. Okay. It'd be the second largest city in the Midwest. The only place in the Midwest bigger than St. Louis, that St. Louis, would be Chicago. And if you're the 10th largest city in America, you got totally different branding issues and options because there are games you can get in because of that size and that order of magnitude that don't nobody give a shit about North St. Louis, Webster, Kinlock, Kirkwood, Riverview going. Nobody know where the fuck that is. They
Right.
don't even know what you're talking about. The 6 times I went to China to negotiate with the Chinese government, we called all of this shit St. Louis because they called all of it St. Louis. Ain't
Mhm.
nobody asked me about Clayton yet.
And when everybody leaves town, they do that. Nobody leaves town and tell you I'm from Florissant.
I say Webster Groves.
Yeah, I was gonna make an exception and say now, the U City people will say something crazy like I'm from U City. But
Well,
still, that's
now,
only because it's in their minds. I
wait a
know
minute.
better.
Now, you first asked the question, have you ever been from before you say that, because you don't want to appear stupid, you say, "Have you ever been to St. Louis?" If they say, "Yeah," you say, "I'm from New City." Now, if they say
Exactly.
no, now if they say no, I ain't never been to St. Louis. They say, "Well, I'm from St. Louis."
I'm
Okay,
from St. Louis, bottom line. But
right?
just the level of, people that you deal with on a regular basis that just have not lived or been anywhere is overwhelming. I don't have 10 friends like me who have, moved away from the city and come back. Almost everybody I know here has never left St. Louis, and it's hard to have conversations with them, Mike. It's difficult.
I
Yeah,
think one of the things about that, Gerald, and I think we continue also to misunderstand and therefore underestimate, um, to the degree again that we forget that Missouri is a slave state.
Hmm.
Unlike a Chicago,
Well,
the you
mm.
know those
Talk
folks
about it. Talk
the
about it.
folks in Chicago leave Chicago because they're going to Mississippi and Alabama and
Hmm.
Arkansas. Folks in Missouri, a bunch of them ain't going nowhere because that's where we were,
Hmm.
right? And so when when my family would leave St. Louis, we wasn't leaving Missouri. We was going to Central Missouri because that's where we were enslaved. That's
Hmm.
where my brother went to Central Missouri State because we had a whole bunch of family that live in all them small towns, you
Hmm.
know, around up in that area. That's
but
that was the
Charles,
piece, and
to,
so
to,
that migration piece impacts that, and so the folks who leave are folks who got family in Alabama and Mississippi and Arkansas. If you ain't
Yeah,
got
you're
that,
right, and
you
that's
just
what
kind of
point,
stay
and
in
that's
St.
why I
Louis.
left. You're
Yeah,
absolutely right.
yeah.
You're
but
absolutely
Charles,
right.
to that point, we think in terms of North and South, but if you take a place like Missouri, you need to think of it in terms of East and West, because the western side of the state is totally different than the eastern side of the state.
True.
Because the western side of the state is where the Missouri-Kansas border wars happened around slavery. So that's a whole different
Whole different people.
historical, whole different historical dynamic, and partially explains why Kansas City is so different from Missouri. I mean, from St. Louis, rather. Okay, they are really two different places, and they're really not that much different in size. And in a state that hasn't grown, Kansas City has been able to kind of hold its own in ways that the St. Louis region has not. And I think a large part of that is this strong Southern influence on this side of the state that's not as strong. Now, I'm not saying the western side of the state is not conservative, but it's conservative in a different frame. It appears. I don't know that. It appears to be a different frame because as I matured, I got now I so matured as I got older in politics, in particular, as my generation emerged as the lead generation. The politics of St. Louis, Black St. Louis, and Black Kansas City totally different. Okay, and Kansas City much more impactful and effective with less people. Okay, than St. Louis. So, and I got a grandson who'll be 27 the day before I'm 77, and he's in Kansas City. And I told him when he moved there as a function of work, and I told him, I said, "You'll love Kansas City." He had never been there. I said, "You'll like it. It's different. It ain't St. Louis, but you'll like it." And it's that ability for improvisation that doesn't exist in St. Louis that changes because it's kind of like if we were jazz musicians, the only thing they'll let you play in St. Louis is what was played already. And you go to Kansas City and you understand what was played already, but you get to figure out how to put your spin on this historical lens and stuff. So it's a completely different environment. And in most of the places you go, and Gerald, to your point, white Texans are no longer the majority uh, in Texas. Okay, that Texas is the majority non-white state. What white folks in Texas have done is locked up and tried to throw away the key to the administrative apparatus of the state of Texas. Because if you ever break it at any point, this Senate race or governor stuff, the whole shit's gonna come loose. And Texas will look like a totally different place. Because if you take out those big counties, Dallas County, Harris County, where San Antonio is, where Austin is, they are holding their own because of a conservative, religious, socially conservative, not politically conservative, that more Hispanic population and a lot of locked in reactionary white folks.
Exactly, and
Because
it's
you
that
can you can get Hispanics with Jesus like you used to can get us with Jesus,
exactly.
and and
Nor do
then
they, and they don't believe of women being in power
right.
positions, and that was going to be another problem
We didn't.
for
Wait a minute.
Jasmine
We
because in
didn't.
their culture they would
We
not
did.
they
But we used to didn't believe that till we didn't have no choice.
exactly. You right,
Okay,
but
we
we
didn't
moved
become
past, we way
enlightened.
past that.
We didn't become enlightened. Necessity became the mother of the invention.
Exactly, but
So
they
don't give us credit for no whole lot of shit because we don't deserve it.
Well,
but
I
he
want to.
that's going to be still an uphill battle for a woman in Texas.
That is correct. Well, listen, I think that we have dealt with these issues
But
uh,
she could be the mayor.
phenomenally.
She could be the mayor of St. Louis all day long.
She
Why
could
would
be.
you want to be the mayor of St. Louis?
We got to do something. She ain't nothing right now. She at least she could come back to. She
But
could
why
be
would
the
you want
mayor.
to be the? But if you could choose,
This is the part when the show is extended. Go
right?
ahead.
Okay, if you could choose the way you was
For the
gonna
love
end
of
it,
your city.
shit. Okay, here's what I used to tell people when they would ask me about was I interested in that. I said, me being the mayor solves your problem. I ain't got no problem that being the mayor solves. Okay, now and on that kind of stuff, it's literally all business, man. I'm paladin, have gun, will travel. If it don't make sense, then you just don't do it. I'm not really the key to all of this stuff, like being a good doctor, a good lawyer. You can't be sentimental about the client.
No, or a good car salesman can't fall in love
Right,
with time.
right,
This is not a museum. All right.
right.
Well, listen, I can't thank you all enough. I think we have laid the framework for something that's going to stand the test of time because this show was phenomenal. And all of these principles are principles that are universal, that are applicable everywhere. And yeah, Mike Jones, I tell you, like the New York brothers, don't dim on your light, God. Don't dim your light, God, because you all were absolutely phenomenal today. I
Well,
want.
if I was a different kind of guy, I apologize for the cursing, but
No,
in
no,
order to make, in order to make the points, I had to be more emphatic. So I went to my other vocabulary. Okay.
well, listen, these are not cupcake times. These are
Right.
serious
Mhm.
times. These are serious. These are the best and the worst times. It's
And we need to feel what you're saying, and we need those words to help us feel it.
those were emphatic. Dr. Alexander, any comments on the way out?
Go to the library.
Go to the
Right.
library. Or go to the
Wait a
library.
minute. And get that card, man. Don't wait. But what did Brother Mazon say in the wire? Who's the most dangerous black man in America? his guy with him say, I don't know. Basically, I cleaned it up a little bit. He said, brother with a library card. Okay.
Jerry L. Kwame, it's Saturday, so go ahead and give us a word on the way out.
I'm still in favor of Crockett coming to St. Louis. I,
All
I
right.
think that she can bring a wealth of information and understanding here, and I think that it is exactly what we need. And I think it would be a benefit to her and her political career. Maybe we can make her a senator out of
Well,
I think
Missouri
you
the same way we
I
did
think
Claire McCaskey.
I think you're projecting. I'll take a
Mhm.
Jerry L. Kwame Christmas over the vast majority of them, and that's Jasmine as well.
wait a minute.
Go,
All I'm gonna say is, even if she's everything you believe that she is, better coaching don't make for more talented players. It just makes for more skilled players based on their talent. And
Mhm.
sometimes you lose for two reasons. You lose for leadership, coaching reasons, and in other times you just your players ain't good enough. Okay, and we have
And
a
that's the
talent.
problem we have now, Mike.
Yeah,
Our players are not
that's
good
what I'm
enough.
talking about. And coaching not gonna solve that.
it's not gonna
Yeah, it's not gonna
solve.
solve. Right. You need
We
better
got a
players.
talent problem. We need
And
We
better
have a
players.
talent problem.
and
And I
Jerry
think she
L.
would help with that talent problem.
Jerry L. is so St. Louis, and in the words of my man in New Jack City, I need a New Jack police officer for a New Jack time, and he is you, and you is he. But anyway, Mike Jones,
I'm
Gerald for
done.
Senate.
that's it. Mike, okay, well, listen, we want to thank you all for ingratiating us. And if it's the Lord's will, we shall see you all again soon. And we are signing off on behalf of Jerry L. Kwame T. Christmas, the Mike Jones, and the Dr. Charles Alexander. I am Attorney Larry Fields. You all have a productive week.